Hello all. Today's video wasn't even going to be a video, but I was feeling inspired by a sense of nostalgia, and here we are. So here's what happened. A viewer very kindly sent me a couple of images from the development of Crossrail, what you'd know as the Elizabeth line these days. These images date from 1993. If you didn't see my many previous videos on the subject of the development of Crossrail, basically what happened was that in the early 1970s, the Crossrail concept was properly devised. I mean, there had been similar ideas before, but it was only in 1974 that an actual plan was published for something that was definitely Crossrail. The Central London Rail Study of 1989 refined it further and added a branch to Aylesbury. By 1991 it was all worked out. A bill was posted to Parliament in 1991, and everything was on course to get the line open by 1996. And then it was cancelled. Let's see what we could have won. The core section is basically exactly what we got, minus Whitechapel and the branch to Abbey Wood. Now, we'll come back to that one, because that one's quite significant. In the west, the line would go to Reading, and there would be a branch to Heathrow, as we have now. But at Old Oak Common, the line would have split in two. One branch would have kept going to Reading, the other would have joined the Chiltern line and gone up to Aylesbury. But here's what's really interesting. The map shows metropolitan interchanges, but they stop after Moor Park. It seems that had this version of Crossrail happened, the Metropolitan line would have lost its branches to Amersham and Chesham, instead terminating at Watford. I'd like to know more about this plan. The trains would have been a variation of the networker trains that were being introduced in the early 90s. This particular variant would have been known as the Class 341. They would have been driver-only operation with 3 sets of double doors per coach. A mock-up was built and displayed at Paddington Station in 1991. The networkers were introduced by Network South East, who would have jointly operated Crossrail with London Transport. Possibly you remember Network South East, or possibly you don't and you're going to make me feel old. If you don't, here's a bit of background. See, what happened in the 80s was that British Rail, the nationalised railway organisation, underwent a restructuring. Formerly, the network was divided into regions. The restructuring was known as sectorisation, and what it meant was that instead of being divided by geography, the network would be divided by types of traffic. So, for example, there was rail freight that dealt with, rail freight, intercity that dealt with long-distance passenger traffic, and so on. Commuter rail in London and the southeast of England was considered a separate thing for the simple reason that it was a denser and busier network than existed anywhere else in the country. Despite this, it was badly neglected and in need of investment. Network South East was a shot in the arm for the lines it took over. In the long run, it would bring new trains and revived services. But what made it really memorable was the aesthetic of it all. Giving away my age here, but I am just about old enough to remember the first Network South East trains showing up. Formerly, trains were painted in a drab blue and grey. The repainted trains wore blue and grey and red and white. The livery was nicknamed Toothpaste. It was very exciting, even if the trains it was painted on were nothing new. But Network South East wasn't just about aesthetics. One of the biggest problems facing the network was capacity. Trains were overcrowded, but there wasn't really anywhere to put more trains. Therefore, while they were painting the town red, white and blue, they were also planning new routes. One you might have heard of was Thameslink, completed in 1990. This provided a north-south route through central London, connecting commuter lines on both sides of the city. But this was a relatively simple programme. The digging a tunnel under London part had already been done in the form of the abandoned Snow Hill Tunnel. Crossrail was rather more ambitious. Still, it was seen as an essential project, hence the speed with which it was pushed forward. Following the government's rejection of the Crossrail proposal, Network South East and London Transport got together to basically do all the planning work that they would have had to do had the plan been authorised. The estimated cost would have been £1.9 billion in 1991 money, and the report demonstrated planning consent, railway inspectorate approval, and engineering designs. And that's how we came to these documents. But as you've no doubt figured out, it was all for nothing. The proposal was rejected for good, or at least for a while, in 1994. As to why, well, there's a clue here. Interchange at Stratford with the future Jubilee extension. You see, while the peeps at London Transport and Network South East were beavering away on Crossrail, an equally ambitious development was popping up in East London. Canary Wharf. This was a massive new business district on a scale simply never seen before in London. It was served by the Docklands Light Railway, but that wouldn't do for this Manhattan-style nest of skyscrapers. When the DLR was devised, it was assumed that development around here would be on a much smaller scale. The developers, Olympia and York, demanded a better rail connection. London Transport offered an extension to the Jubilee line of the London Underground, something they'd been trying to get off the ground for years. But the Treasury wasn't going to cover two enormous rail projects, and for the government of the time, an exciting new business district was just a bit more attractive. That being said, this plan also includes interchange with the Chelsea-Hackney line, and we're still waiting on that one. Not that that has much to do with Canary Wharf, I just wanted to highlight it. Writing scripts is hard. Now, whenever I look at one of these proposals, I like to ask, how much of this made it into the final project? Well, the most obvious point is the Class 341s. Much of the design work done on those was used in the development of the Class 345s, which are the trains now used on the Elizabeth line. When the Crossrail concept was revived in 1999, when the Jubilee line extension was nearly complete, a number of routes were considered. Yet when the dust had settled, the route chosen was from Reading to Shenfield, with a branch at Heathrow. The only major difference was that now there would also be a branch to Abbey Wood, and a key factor in that particular route being chosen was that it would serve the Docklands, at the heart of which was Canary Wharf. So, in a note of historical irony, Canary Wharf would both kill and revive Crossrail. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do leave a like and perhaps subscribe for more. In the course of researching this, I came across a lot of other fascinating plans from the development stages of Crossrail, and you can bet those will be getting their own videos in the future, so keep an eye out for that. I would like to thank my benefactor who supplied me with the plans that inspired this video. I also made extensive use of Chris Green and Mike Vincent's The Network South East story to fill in a lot of the gaps, a book that I would generally recommend if you're curious about the history of Network South East. I would like to thank, as ever, my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the modifications to my networker. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.